Hi, folks. Welcome to Monday's edition of the I Write Radio podcast stroke videocast. A bit of dead tree news today. We're going to have a chat about a piece by George Kerevan, Ruth Wishart, and Ben Wray of Commonweal. But we'll have a quick chat about the press conference, the coronavirus update, as the BBC refer to it. Thoughts on that, Stuart? Jimmy, you missed it, eh?
I did, mate, aye.
Well, it wasn't terribly long. It was slightly fractious. It got delayed a bit because the First Minister explained they're going to change one of their metrics, which is 70, whether she tells you how many new cases there are, and then she says what percentage of the number people tested, and I'm not going to mention any detail, but there'll be change in the way they count that. She will just say, we also discovered before even she started this press briefing that there'd been a cock up on the number of tests done, so that yesterday, according to the official figures, there were only 300 and odd positive new positive cases yesterday in Scotland, whereas we've been clocking up well over 1,000 for days now.
And that became a topic.
That became a row.
Because it was the Lighthouse lab that the cock-up referred to. Her explanation was not that it wasn't a cock-up.
Well, she was trying to, she keeps backpedaling on that. She doesn't want to have a go at the
Well, she doesn't,
government.
no. So she was explaining that it wasn't a cock-up as much as a change in methodology, and as much as some tests went to other Lighthouse labs, not the Glasgow one, and that had caused the delay.
But some of the hacks weren't happy with that, and one of them actually accused her of, asked her a straight question. Are you annoyed that you're stuck with a system that's not working? But this is reference to the UK part of it, Oh, yeah. No, we decided at the staff that we'd have to have a UK system. There was a kind of, at last, it's been drawn out, like drawn teeth, six months later. Why? We're stuck with a crap system.
I mean, I think she's playing it right, because what the papers are looking for is for her to complain about it, so they can have a headline, Sturgeon lambasts UK testing system. That's what they're looking for. Then they're not looking for reasons and
if that was
methodologies.
No, if that's all there was to it, she could have done that 6 months ago and had the row over with, and we would have moved on. But it's been good.
But she couldn't. The Lighthouse at Glasgow University was the only way that we could ramp up testing quickly. She had to go with that. There was no other way for us to ramp up testing to the levels that they wanted to get to.
I'm certainly not disagreeing with Jimmy. It was just that you get the feeling that she didn't want to say she was annoyed, but it was the UK part of the system that was letting us down in Scotland.
I'd guarantee you that Jason Leach or whatever would love to go into there and bang heads together, but they can't do it.
So I think she's playing it right.
Okay. No, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Keeping politics out of it, while the papers desperately try to get their headline.
Well, there were another two things that hacks were having a go at. The police. Now, we discovered over the weekend that certainly police south of the border were getting information about people who should be self-isolating, so they could go around and check if they were or weren't they. She was asked about that. She didn't want to admit that the police in Scotland had that information. She didn't deny it, and she wouldn't admit it because it puts people off going for a test in the first place.
Yeah, so you can guarantee that they do have access to that information, or she would just have said that they didn't.
Yeah.
So there you go. If you've downloaded the app, the Rozzers are on your tail.
And she didn't want to.
Well, they can't. Sorry, Jimmy, they can't get it through the app. This would have to be test and trace.
But she did admit. She admitted that the councils in Scotland get the information who these people are because they need to be able to contact them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's through test and protect.
Well, yeah, and then of course the question then is, do the police get that information from the council? Well, she wouldn't deny it at the moment. Let's put it that way.
Well,
Didn't
I would think somebody has to have the information in order for the help to be given.
But they don't
Yeah,
want.
but Police Scotland don't necessarily need to have access to that.
I mean, they're still trying to. There's a general, as a general rule, she tries to say that we are not enforcing as strictly as they are south of the border. We're expecting more. It's more carrot. It's more encouragement. She keeps her. That's been her theme all along, hasn't it?
But there's always a worry when police are given access to a database, because almost without them noticing it, they start to use the database as a basis for their work. So if they've got access to a database telling them that so-and-so has tested positive and should be inside the house, the first thing they'll do anytime they lift anybody is check whether they should be in the house or not. It would just happen automatically. They wouldn't mean to do it. It would just be done.
No, you're right, Jimmy. I mean, absolutely. They can't. I mean, if you watch any of these detective or police shows, I mean, if they've got a crime to solve of any kind, they'll draw on all the resources they can to solve it.
Why is that a problem?
Well, because it induces institutional laziness. They'll tell you that somebody can't have committed that offence because they were in the house, and who knows whether they were in the house or not. I was just wanted to bring up the thing in Wales, guys, just because they've made that announcement at lunchtime of what they're calling a fire break. But already in the media, there's heavy pushback against the decision that they've made.
There's the lockdown.
Yeah, businesses are going nuts, mate, because they've got counties where they've got 2 cases per 100,000, and they're now going to have a 2-week lockdown because counties in the south and north of Wales have got 150 or 200 cases per 100,000.
And they're
raging about it. They're absolutely beeling, and this could. I know there's pushback in England and Manchester, but Wales has kind of backed their government to quite a large extent. If there's pushback there, are we seeing the worm turning somewhat?
I mean, and it was described as the lockdown, the fire break is going to be as strict as it was in March, as like the original one.
Even when the half-term breaks up, I think year 7 and year 8 kids are going back to school, but those above them are not for these 2 weeks. So it seems to be quite a strict one.
What I find quite interesting about it is what is regional in England is national in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, when you count numbers.
That's true, but in Wales they have been dealing with it on a local authority level, and they're quite small, some of the local authorities in Wales.
They seem to have been doing quite a good job, and as I say, there are huge discrepancies within Wales itself, and you can understand if somebody's in a rural. If you've got a business that's operating in a rural part of Wales and there's virtually no COVID there, and you're getting told that you're going to have to shut for the next fortnight because 150 miles away in Cardiff or whatever, it's rampant. You can understand why people are pretty hacked off.
Well, look at the date. 19th of October, furlough runs to the end of this month. I keep saying that. They don't talk about money in so many of these reports, but money has to be part of it.
Money's huge, aye.
So in a way, decisions made at Westminster are forcing the hand of some of these governments.
Absolutely.
Northern Ireland as well.
I'm pretty sure that's why Scotland, Northern Ireland and now Wales have jumped when they did back into semi-lockdown or whatever, because they had to. The furlough scheme's ending at the end of the month, and they know they can't do it next month. They don't have the wherewithal.
The argument is that Scotland, because of the timing of the tatty holidays here being a bit earlier than in the October break there in England and Wales, that of course we're 2 weeks into it, nearly 2 weeks into it, aren't we here? And they've gone in earlier and they haven't had to be as strict.
Yeah, finishes next Monday. Everything's meant to open again, but I'll say now I'd be very surprised if that's the case.
She said as much, and she even admitted that they may have to close the odd school, which was.
Well,
that's been my issue since this whole thing kicked off, mate. When you take a look at the figures, and schools was the main driver. Schools going back was the main driver behind an increase in cases, as was universities going back. And both of those decisions were taken for the good of the economy.
The chief nursing officer claimed just about half an hour ago, towards the end of the briefing, that the schools weren't an issue. Yes, the testing went up, but the amount of positive cases didn't go up.
I didn't believe the chief nursing officer, mate. I think she's better off reading knitting patterns and sticking to that. I think she's been a disaster. She's been a disaster every time she's appeared in the telly, and she's got worse every time she's appeared in the telly. So I think she should not be making another appearance. I think she's there to make Nicola look good.
Oh,
I spotted that as well, Stuart. I'd like to see the figures.
I'd like to see the figures. Did you notice, Norrie, that was it Jack Foster? Now, there's a name easy to remember, I would say. I think there was a nursery rhyme similar to that. A young laddie from Global Radio. He tried to stir the shit, didn't he? He accused the First Minister of the F.A.C.T.S, F.A.C.T.S. It was too complex. You see, bear in mind, in England, they've got a three-syllable something. I don't even know what it is in England. Anyway, so he accused the First Minister of having something that was too complex and people couldn't remember what it was. She wasn't happy at that. She said, look, because the challenge was that she said to the guy, if it's too complicated, it's because the media's not doing their job explaining it, more or less.
Aye, and let's be honest, because Dominic Cummings is a disciple of the devil and likes to do things in triplicate, should we just follow his example? I think not.
Okay, test time. What does FACTS stand for, Stuart?
Face. Oh God, I don't know. I don't know.
Avoid contact with people.
All right. C is cleaning your hands. T is 2 meters, and S is
self-isolate.
Oh, self-isolate.
So between the three of us, we got there.
So got there. Oh, here,
and let's be honest, whether people came what the acronym means or not, the acronym is basically a way for her to every day squeeze into 30 seconds the messaging that they want to get out there, which is gonna look after yourself and look after the folk round about you.
Right, we've also got another name hack. What's his name? Derek somebody or other at the Courier. Now, he was at it, wasn't he? He said he'd heard word that there was oh God, you could just hear them greeting here, thinking no, could hear them down at the office at the Courier in Dundee, thinking, oh, we've got them here. So the question was apparently, remembrance services have all been cancelled, but there's an Indy something or other going to happen in Dundee. So, and it was like, she's having none of that at all. He'll be barred. Because, I mean, he was just trying to catch her out, wasn't he?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the rules for the Indy. It's a static march. What's a static march?
A static rally.
Static
people
protest,
stand. I've seen them. They stand up apart and they don't move around.
Fully masked up. With the plastic bags over their head, etc., etc. Well, I mean, if they want to do it, let them do it. I don't actually see the point in it, to be honest. But there you go.
No, but it gets them at the house, mate. It's usually the Looney Tunes that go to these things anyway. So
no.
Right.
Well, come on, the hardcore Looney Tunes are we've got as many BAMs as everybody else, Stuart. Doesn't mind if they want to out their cell and go and stone in Dundee on a Sunday afternoon, let them.
We've got
just because you won't go in a march doesn't mean to say 50,000 Scots don't want to go on one.
Lads, we'll have the argument at pro and anti-march later. Okay. let's move on now. Let's have a chat about Ben Wray's piece.
No, it's not Ben
Bella.
Wray's piece. It's actually look, let me
It wasn't
let
in
me-
Bella
let-
anyway, was it?
no,
It was a
let-
Commonweal.
no, it wasn't even on Commonweal. But anyway, it started off with Neil Mackay, who is always. It always starts off. He's writer at large on the Herald. He likes to pretend he's not part of the team, and he interviewed Andrew Wilson, the Growth Commission guy, works at Charlotte Street Partners, and that interview was what upset Ben Wray at Source, Commonweal, and both Mike Small, and up me, to be honest. But that was what really got it going, because basically, you know what Andrew Wilson's been saying, the Growth Commission, he wants to do sterlingisation. He can't even see independent Scotland until something like 2035.
Well, no, what he's saying is 2026, but your own currency.
For another 10 years before
10
you
years
get your own
after that.
currency.
Yeah.
God, for crying out, you're not independent until you got your own currency.
Well, actually,
Tell that to Germany and France. They've not got their own currency.
you know, I mean, what the argument is about is whether we stick with the Bank of England. That's what the argument's about.
Well, the argument's much wider than that. It's just that, I mean, Neil Mackay claimed that Andrew Wilson was the brains behind the Yes movement.
Oh, sorry, we're not talking about currency. We're talking about the
No,
article.
currency was just a topic, a part of it. It was, the whole thing was about
Well, Neil Mackay
Wilson.
claimed, Stuart, Neil Mackay claimed that because he claims it gets right under your skin and people like you, and he claimed that Andrew Wilson's the brains behind the Yes movement because he knew it would upset people and he knew that it would make people click on his article. That's why it's clickbait.
All
Something
right,
like
fair
that.
enough. But the Growth Commission, sorry, I mean, it was out of date when it was done, and it's now 5 years old.
Well, we briefly mentioned this yesterday. I mean, the way things are going at the moment, anything that's written could well be out of date before it's printed, because the scene is changing so fast at the moment. I mean,
imagine if Boris gets a deal. Everything that's been said over the last 18 months is out of date at that point.
yeah.
Well, at that point, you got to take into account what Ruth Wishart was saying. It was quite surprising. Ruth Wishart, the grand dame of Scottish writer. She used to write for the Sunday Post, and she's in a hurry to move on. Whereas you got Andrew Wilson, he'd be quite happy just sitting there, and if there wasn't, he'd probably have UK OK.
Well,
he even had Union Jack cushions in the background.
Stuart, one of the big things about Andrew Wilson is he's actually, if you read between the lines of the article, he's actually right on most things. The thing about sterlinisation, I think he's wrong about, but everybody that's running about at the moment saying modern monetary theory is the way forward and that's how we go and we'll just start a new currency about that. What happens when the banks turn around and say, ram it? There's not a single financial institution anywhere on the world that has done any kind of dealings with any politician who espouses modern monetary theory. Why do you think that is?
And yet they're practicing modern monetary theory. They just don't like the terminology.
Absolutely, because they need to keep it limited. The only way they can practice it is to keep it limited, because if modern monetary theory runs out of hand, then their shareholders lose out. The value is owned by their shareholders.
Yeah, I mean,
and they can't have that.
I mean, it's because of the huge increase in unemployment we're all expecting because of the pandemic that makes modern monetary theory practical, you could say.
But
yeah,
right, wait a minute, guys. Modern monetary theory is applied now. The difference is it's applied by the banks who charge interest. When they hit their keys to create the money, they also hit another key with a percentage sign on it that makes them their money.
Yeah, but interest rates are going negative at the moment.
That's why they want control of it. Interest rates are negative for some people, Stuart, but they're no negative if you've got a mortgage.
They're also no negative if your name's Jeff Bezos or J.K. Rowling or somebody like that who has billions or hundreds of millions sitting.
They're negative for institutions, but not for individuals.
I still remember when I first started working for the bank, and I thought that, you know, before you get involved in it, you think, oh, the people with the large amounts of money are the people that are the most valuable customers. But no, the most valuable customers are the people with the largest loans, of course.
Yeah,
They're-
with the
they're-
biggest overdrafts, the people that need to
yeah,
borrow money
exactly.
all the time.
The
And
other,
that,
I mean,
and that still applies.
it's not just about sterlingization. I think this article that upsets so many people. You got things like, I'd love people like Alistair Darling, Gordon Brown, and others to play a role in making good the decisions of independence. And I think also we want Scotland to pay an annual solidarity payment from Scotland to the UK after independence.
I think you could call that whatever you want. Annual solidarity payment sounds horrific, but at the end of the day, it would be a payment of our interest on the debt, because England will only ever pay back the interest on their debt, not the debt.
Well, before we start paying back interest on the debt, I want to know what England's paying us for the 10th of all their embassies, etc., etc. I want to see the balance sheet.
I'd still want them to work out if they ever paid what they were going to pay in 1707.
Well,
because
they
if you
didn't.
backdate that bill, I reckon that'd wipe out most of what we're due to them.
Well, they didn't. So, no, there are, the balance sheet has to be seen and made public before we agree to pay anything to England.
As for Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling, I think he's trying to hint at after an independence vote that we would have to appeal to Labour voters, because I know Labour are in the doldrums at the moment, but you would kind of, after an Indy vote, that's a sensible option. We're going to have 40% of the country minimum that are unhappy with the result, so we have to find ways to work together and live together.
Jimmy, I'm sorry. There's no way Gordon Brown or Darling should be involved at all.
No, I think Darling would be somebody fantastic to look over the books and tell us whether they're clean or not.
You're presuming he actually knows what he's talking about, and not just doing what he was told by bankers. That's my problem. My problem with it is that I don't think they're competent. I really don't. I think if we're looking for neutrals, if that's the right word, to come in and advise the Scottish government, the last place to be looking is at any of the political parties in Scotland.
You're probably right.
And I'm beginning to think we might have to include the SNP in that. But, you know, I don't see the competence there.
No, but
would you let them teach your bairns?
The rest of the country does. The rest of the country voted for them. You know what I mean? They are still seen by many people in Scotland as being trustworthy. I didn't understand how, but there's a lot of people out there that still think Gordon Brown's a voice of reason, for crying out loud.
Well, I'm sorry. It's certainly not my position. So, having discussed the Wilson interview, which was what the article was based on, Ben Wray at Commonweal, he got stuck right in about it and basically took your position on it, Stuart, that Wilson shouldn't be allowed to open his mouth in public ever again.
It's the deceit, you know, like he refused. Charlotte Street Partners, which he runs, is the most successful political lobbying organisation in Scotland, and he denies that they lobby government.
Stuart, you say that, but where's your proof? Other than the fact that people like Bella espouse that all the time.
No, that's what their job is. That's what's on their website.
But he said himself he has once been into the Scottish Parliament to talk about government policy.
Why are you defending Andrew Wilson?
Because you're coming in and attacking him, but you're just chucking the statements out there. You're just asserting stuff that Bella and that assert without any proof.
It's got nothing to do with Bella. I know far more. I've been aware of Charlotte Street Partners an awful lot longer than I've been aware of Bella.
Well, bully for you, but back up your assertion that Andrew Wilson is a lobbyist.
That's what they're set up to do.
He's told you he's registered once to lobby within Holyrood in 4 years. So do you think that the register of lobbying interest is wrong and doesn't work then? You think he's telling lies?
Just because they don't use the term lobbying doesn't mean to say they're not lobbying. They all deny they're lobbying. They call themselves think tanks.
Stuart. Well, I mean, what are we but a think tank?
You,
Oh,
okay.
I wouldn't go that far.
Commentators, yes. Think tank, no.
Nobody's paying us for our thoughts, but that's what a think tank is. It's a discussion that comes up with some ideas that they then try and push into the mainstream of politics. That's what a think tank does. Commonweal's a think tank in the official accepted sense of it. No, I'm with Jimmy on this one. I mean, if the guy says he doesn't lobby and he doesn't register to lobby, he doesn't lobby. He might talk to his ex-pals about stuff. Who knows?
What do you think Charlotte Street Partners do then if they're not lobbying government on behalf of their customers?
I don't know.
Well, why do they exist?
But if they don't register as lobbyists and they're lobbying, they're breaking the law.
Oh God, you're living in cloud cuckoo land. Right.
All
let's
right.
move on.
Okay. Thanks for that.
I don't know why you two are defending Charlotte Street Partners. I have no idea. You're on the take.
Thanks for that as well, Stuart. Are you a conspiracy theorist? You know, I mean, you've no proof of it.
I don't need proof. That's what the company is set up to do.
How do you know?
Influence government. That's what Charlotte Street Partners does.
Okay.
They charge their customers for. If they don't do that, they're cheating their customers.
Who are their customers, Stuart?
God. As if they're going to show me their list of their invoice list.
You've made a huge presumption there, Stuart, and you haven't backed any of it.
But what do you think Charlotte Street Partners do?
I think they're a PR firm, like they say they are on their website.
Oh, they advise people on the Scottish scene, as far as I understand it.
What's the difference between PR and lobbying? Jesus.
Oh.
They have fantastic access because of who works for them and who is involved with them and who is on their board.
Exactly.
The fact that they have that access doesn't mean that they're some kind of...
They have access to
because,
knowledge.
you know, they're based in Charlotte Square and they've got an ex-banker on the book, so they must be evil. That kind of nonsense is... I'd expect it for Mike Small.
I mean,
I'd expect it for...
lobbying is about influencing policy.
You're putting words in my mouth, Jimmy. You know you are.
Well, lobbying is about influencing policy.
Exactly.
Having knowledge of policy and the setup of government and sharing that knowledge with clients is not the same thing as lobbying.
And shaping the message is what PR firms do.
Well, and then they're not a PR firm then. Because what they're doing is sharing their knowledge with their clients. That's my understanding. I mean, I've never thought of them as lobbyists. I actually have to admit, I never really worked out why they existed. But there you go. If somebody's willing to pay you, they're willing to pay you.
There's always got to be a bridge between government and the private sector. And if you can get somebody like Andrew Wilson and you can get Angus Grossart on board, mate, these guys are probably on board more for their contact book than anything else. More for who's on their contact list in their phone. Well, because between Andrew Wilson and Angus Grossart, they could probably call up virtually anybody with any influence on the financial sector in Scotland straight away with those two names.
You've said me a lot of words there, Jimmy. I could have said the same.
Well, what I find most interesting about it is the fact that Andrew Wilson is a member of Charlotte Street Partners.
He set it up.
And being the go-to guy for the Herald to talk about independence. That bothers me because I really do not want somebody working in Charlotte Street and living in Balerno with a man shed deciding policy for independence.
Well, there's one good thing about Balerno, Norrie. If we ever want to take out Andrew Wilson, there's one road in and one road out. He couldn't run very far.
There'll be a couple of tracks, is there not, that you could escape up?
Aye, but he doesn't look fit, mate. He wouldn't be able to race up the hill faster than you in your electric wheelchair, pal.
I hope. It's not an all-terrain chair, Jimmy.
That's all right. Me and James can sort that out for you.
Okay, let's move on to George Kerevan.
Hi.
Watch the same light. George wrote a piece today. I said earlier to Stuart that there are certain people who write about independence. Mike Small, George Kerevan, I would include, and quite a few unionists who shape the argument to suit their political position. Now, George is a lefty, quite far left for mainstream politics. And his argument is that we need the shape of our independent country decided before independence. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's what you should do. You get independence and then the people decide the shape of the country.
I agree with you, Noria. Can I just read out part of the headline? New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern projects a caring collectivist green agenda, which is what people want in a time of plague. So, you know, and then, you know, the other headline is, this is why Indy F.A.C.T.S will be won by radical policies, not moderate ones. I mean, that just sums up what you've just said, Dory, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, the first headline is about stability, dependability. The second headline is about revolution. It's one is just the opposite of the other.
That's George to a T, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
he's always been the revolutionary with woolly boots and a cup of tea in his hand, mate. Maybe he'd encourage people to revolt, but George would stand on the sidelines and watch it and write about it.
I'd rather have George there and Peter A. Bell there, because Peter A. Bell is absolutely, he gets very angry if you try to bring policies into the argument for independence. As he points out, a referendum is yes or no. It's not about whether you like this policy or that policy. It's about yes or no on one question.
Well, every time I read George when he's doing this, we've got to decide the shape of the nation before independence, it makes me think of Rise.
It's extreme control freakery, isn't it? To decide how you can have an independent Scotland, but only if you have it on my terms, Scotland. Because if they're not going to be on my terms, then I think I might spit the dummy out and go in a huff.
I think that was some of the arguments against Andrew Wilson, of course.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong on this. I mean, I'm probably quite close to George politically. And I would like to see a very left of centre Scotland. But first independence, and then the people decide. Can you imagine the argument with Mr. Wilson and Mr. Kerevan about the shape of a future Scotland?
You give them I think they need to give them boxing gloves, I think.
You know, I mean, one wouldn't vote for a Scotland shaped like the other to be independent. So the decision for the shape, the look, the feel, the colour of an independent Scotland is for the day after we vote for independence. That's when that argument starts.
That's another argument, of course. I think perhaps, I don't know if Ruth Wishart comments on that, but I mean, it is to some extent, the last Indy Ref, pro-independence people were trying to paint, well, you could be accused of it was like all about unicorns. It's going to be rainbows and lovely and sunshine if we get independence. And that's not what it's about. It is about the people will make the decision probably based on risk. Is it risky to go for independence, or is it riskier to stay with what we've got?
Well, I mean, Ruth Wishart, not surprisingly, as the only woman who wrote a piece on this subject, was the sensible one.
Up to this week anyway, yeah.
You know, I mean, her position basically is that she's fed up waiting. She wants it to happen. And that let's get it over and done with, and then we can shape the country. Because we have no idea where this UK government is going to take us.
I do like sometimes, well, you always look at the headlines and think, does that headline have anything to do with what's inside the article? But she knows what she's doing. She writes her own headlines. We have two schools of thought. Steady as she goes, don't frighten the horses. Caution will win the day, harvest the waverers. Or How much more evidence do we need of Westminster duplicity and post-Brexit calamity? Let's get moving while all the stars are aligned. I
Yeah.
think that says it all. She doesn't need to write the article.
Well, I find it quite difficult to criticize anything in the article. There's nothing I can remember from it that I really disagreed with. And I think one of the points she makes is the central argument for the next independence referendum. The unsteady, the doubtful, the uncertainty all lies with staying with Westminster.
That's what I mean. That's the biggest change. And that's why we should be considering going sooner rather than later, because, 2 or 3 years down the line, the risks that we see now with staying in the UK may not appear to be the same.
Was it George that talked about revolution? The independence.
No, that'll be Mike Small or Ben Wray, wouldn't it?
Oh, it was maybe Mike Small. It would be Mike Small, right enough.
I mean, Mike Small only chucked his tuppence-worth in about an hour before, about 11 o'clock this morning. His only appeared. Ben Wray, of course, is from the same school of thought, isn't he? He does
well, all three of them, George, Ben Wray, and Mike Small.
They're all pretty far on the left.
Yeah.
But
Jimmy,
sorry, Jimmy.
As our official man of the left.
Not really, mate. But I don't despair, but I tire of reading leftist essayists who their language is beautiful. It just bores the shit out of me because we've been reading the same stuff since the 70s, basically. Scotland's on a path to independence, and Scotland's people are on a path to independence. Save us from lefties trying to direct us to their version of it. Because the version of it that will actually happen, that's marching up the path as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much a centre-left version for the first 10 years. It's going to be Nicola Sturgeon that leads us to independence, more than likely, unless she manages to trip over her husband's feet or something. It wouldn't be a left-wing country because it's not a left-wing electorate. It doesn't matter how many years lefties try to tell us that Scotland's remarkably different from England and far more left-leaning. It's no. The people of Scotland are kind of centrist. That's why the SNP have occupied the centre ground for the last 15 years and been successful.
Yeah, very good.
I do think there are what we would consider left-wing policies that can be introduced without a whimper of dissent.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Nationalising the railways, nationalising power, big step. But if it could be done, I think she would carry the population. Well, I'm saying she. I think the government of the day that did it would carry the population with them.
There was meant to be something in this parliament about a low-cost energy provider for people in Scotland, and that's just never happened. I take it that was something that just proved either too difficult or too complex.
Well, there was talk of a government company.
Mm-hmm.
Energy company, which hopefully the population would flock to become part of, and the privately owned companies would just wither and die. Which I see nothing wrong with. I have to say, I think that would be quite a smart way to do it.
Well, there's various small ones dotted around Scotland and the rural communities, mate. Can we local co-ops that are providing energy through windmills and stuff like that? But I think as I say that, I'm pretty sure there was meant to be something in the course of this parliament, but I'm assuming with the pandemic and various elections that took place now, it was one of these things that got quietly dropped.
Yeah.
Well, look, the question of things getting dropped is brings it back to something else that Ruth Wishart says about the situation. She thinks that the Scottish government has become a one-woman administration, and it's like the bandwidth isn't there. In other words, things have been dropped that didn't need to be. I mean, there's an awful lot of our politicians not doing very much, especially apart from constituency issues down at Westminster, aren't there?
I hope you're wrong. I hope, because she's sort of all-encompassing at the moment, that's freeing up lots of our MSPs to be working on things like independence referendums,
Aye.
as well as policy. They do need a refresh of policy for next year. So I hope they're working on it.
Aye, they need a very, very decent manifesto with plenty of detail and plenty of stuff to be getting on with.
Yeah.
And they desperately need to address the fact that the Yes movement is choking for Indy and give us something to fight for.
Aye, but I think they're going to have to raid the Greens manifesto and the Labour Party manifesto unless they come up with one big idea. And they've got another problem coming, because whatever their policies, if it doesn't suit Boris's government, remember, they'll be able to override it.
Exactly. They've got to actually have a serious think about the internal market bill and how they are going to disable that, how they are going to get round it, how they're going to, when some clown from Boris's government turns around to the Scottish government in 2022 or 2023 and says, by the way, that policy that you put to the Scottish people and they voted for in their hundreds of thousands, you're not getting to bring it in because it doesn't suit us. They need to have possibly a legal challenge to everything, but also they need to have a campaign to get the people of Scotland to absolutely kick up about it.
There was it was a potential topic for today, but it's probably better for tomorrow or Wednesday, because the progress of that internal market bill, it's in the Lords at the moment and they're pulling it apart there. So perhaps in a day or two we should have a look at that.
Well, they've already
detail.
Stated that it impacts the devolved settlement. Well, it rides roughshod over, under, through, and on top of the devolved settlement.
I mean, yeah, and they've more or less agreed with what we all knew in the independent side, that it actually is completely
huge headlines in the Telegraph about everything except that.
Well, yeah, it's not just the illegal international breaking an international treaty. It's also how it does take all the power away from the devolved administrations and places it in a cabinet secretary in Westminster. It can overrule anything.
As much as we all hate the House of Lords, there are some fabulous minds that reside in there. So
I've always said that the idea of the House of Lords, where you have specialists sitting in a second chamber, which is the argument for the House of Lords, although it obviously doesn't apply to all of them, is a great idea. Unelected, I don't see the necessity for being unelected. I see the necessity for it being non-party political and full of experts.
No, I don't think they should be full of experts. We need a second house where people are just at random, like juries, and they spend 6 months and they get good support. They get experts to back up to each one of them, but they maybe spend 6 months of their life representing us all just by lottery.
I think you'd have to give them a bit longer.
All right, call it a year then.
But yeah, because you would, by natural selection, get a few experts in there, and with the ability then to call on people who are expert in the field of their choice. But it's an interesting one. It always amazes me that politicians want people elected to a second chamber.
There's an awful lot of politics that gets politics that never gets discussed in this country because of the whole strangeness of the Westminster system, whereby not one parliament can commit any parliament that follows it to follow any law that they make. So this is why the EU don't trust what's happening here with Boris and that. Boris and that could make a law now and say yes. In fact, David Davis suggested they'd make a law to agree with, to line up with the EU, but the EU won't believe that, because the next parliament could just throw that law out.
Well, they just bloody did the withdrawal agreement.
And which is why the EU is demanding there must be an arbitration method. It's got nothing to do. It's got to last longer than one bloody parliament in Westminster.
I think I'm turning into a Brexiteer, because I am beginning to believe what the Tory press is telling me about this is all an EU plot to undermine Britain's greatness.
Yes.
You could be right. By the same token, Michael Gove should possibly be president of the world.
I think we should just make him president of the universe. Then
He's
they
a
got
God botherer, mate. He only believes in the world. He doesn't believe in the rest of the universe.
Oh, right. Okay. He's a God botherer.
Aye, amongst his many sins, he's a God botherer.
I hope he's not a Catholic. He'll never be at a confession.
I had a very good Catholic friend, and I was always jealous of him because he could always, he could sin all week and just go and get forgiven on Sunday.
I'm
Aye,
not
but he
entirely, I'm not
Aye, but he couldn't
entirely
have
sure.
mince and tatties. He couldn't have mince and tatties on a Friday, mate.
I'm not entirely sure that's how it works.
And he even had an indulgence. Apparently, his grandfather had bought an indulgence, which meant that he would go straight to heaven. He wouldn't get stuck in purgatory because he was the grandson of somebody that bought one of these things from the Pope.
Right. So I always liked the Calvinists. I like their attitude. If you're one of the chosen few, it doesn't matter what you do, you go to heaven. You do anything you want.
You're talking about the select.
Is that what I'm talking about?
Yes,
Right, okay.
the select.
I thought that was a better system.
Or the elect, depending on how you put it. Yeah.
So if I got to be one of the elect, I'm sure I could handle the Kirk on a Sunday.
I've just left. I'm
No,
just racked
no,
with
no.
guilt all my life. I've been racked with guilt. I've been being brought up in the Kirk.
Nothing. There's absolutely nothing to be feel guilty for.
Nothing
No,
at
well,
all.
sure, you've not murdered anybody as far as I can see. You're no Jimmy Savile, so I wouldn't worry about it, mate.
Well.
Right, well, that's true. Well, I think we've kind of run out. Jimmy, seeing as we haven't seen you for a while, anything that you've got to get off your chest before we go?
No, not really, mate. I'm quite chilled at the moment. I had a rather pleasant weekend watching football and what have you. And
Oh, I
like
forgot
I'm
about
busy.
Congratulations.
It was a splendid result. Unfortunate for the green half of Glasgow, but get it right out Runges. But mate, I'm quite chilled at the moment, apart from the fact that I do wish this mini lockdown of ours would hurry up and end, because it's a bit depressing driving around Edinburgh seeing everything shut.
I was going to say you'll be getting plenty of sleep while you're in the taxi now.
Aye, mate. Aye, it's a bit of a worry. Somebody stuck their hand out the other day, and I was a bit tiggy on the Vickies. I didn't care what they were doing. I got to fight my life, and somebody actually hailed me.
Oh well.
Well, I drove through Edinburgh Saturday, yes, and I went going to the Pentlands, and I would normally go out the A1 and round the bypass, but I thought, wait a minute, the town will be quiet, and I did. I went along to Golden Acre and went straight south, right through the town, up the mound and all the way out that way to Morningside and everything, and I really enjoyed it because it was
getting to see the buildings.
There was traffic, but it was a pleasure driving through the town.
The roads were quiet. On Friday when I went out to the Royal, the only problem was the roadworks. That was the only thing slowing anything down.
Well, right now I can recommend Golden Acre to Morningside. No problem.
They've dug up everything, mate. Fortunately, they've just finished work on some of the major roads, but that no doubt they'll reopen them again shortly. Between that and as my usual rant about trying to get to Leith because of the tram works, but
well, obviously what happens is as soon as they finish the roadworks, BT discover that they need to dig it up, and then the water board discover they need to dig it up just after BT's finished.
Aye, that's the usual.
Because they no sooner cobbled Henderson Street than it got dug up. And they made a lovely job of it, I have to say.
Sometimes they do, mate. Aye, sometimes they do. They made a lovely job at House Street and everything down into...
They must have imported the cobblers from Eastern Europe, I think.
I believe they were from the south of England, mate. It certainly wasn't any Scots boys that were doing it. Aye,
I don't know what roads you're talking about, yeah, but
they made a cracking job of it. Beautiful camper.
Look at the state of the shore.
Smooth as a baby's bottom with acne.
Aye. With all the undulations.
Right, I think we'll call it a day at that. I'm sure our listeners were delighted with the local information.
Aye,
by the time they won't hear it. They've faded away long before then.
Thanks for making it today, Jimmy.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Stuart.
Okay.
I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening and watching, folks. And we'll catch you tomorrow with more tales from the road surfacing of Leith. Cheers for now.